Thank you for your patience. My name is Eric Thrasher, and I am the hearing officer for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise Waiters is the clerk this morning. This hearing is being recorded, and a sign-in sheet is on the table at the side of the room over there. I think everyone's signed in, but if you want to receive updates on these cases, please make sure you put your email address there so we can forward to you the developments and the updates. The hearing today is held to consider the following 4 orders. Order number 202418, to consider an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for illegal pruning of one street tree adjacent to 318 Lakeview Avenue. Order number 202419, to consider an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for illegal pruning of one street tree adjacent to 216 Devlin Street. Order 202420, to consider an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for illegal pruning of one street tree adjacent to 71 Clarendon Avenue. And Order 202421, to consider an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for illegal pruning of one street tree adjacent to 75 Clarendon Avenue. My job as a hearing officer is to gather the facts for the hearing item, to listen to your testimonies, and to help our Director of Public Works make determinations. I will not be making any decisions today. I will instead forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the Director. The Director of Public Works makes the final determinations. When the Director's determinations are made, the Department will notify you of them by email. The hearing will proceed as follows for the cases that I just mentioned. First, I will have the Public Works staff speak first and present the case. Then the property owner or the appellant or applicant may speak. Then any member of the public or witness who wants to speak, followed by the department, if the department would like to address any comments or follow up on any questions. And finally, the property owner or the appellant or applicant may return again and speak if the person has any rebuttals. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers. When you hear the first bell, it will mean the speaker has 30 seconds left to speak. A second louder bell will signal that the time is up. Comments and questions should be addressed to me, the hearing officer, and not to the department or to the applicant. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony to me by the end of this hearing. If I feel that a question is warranted, I will ask the question. After all the comments are completed, I will close the item, and we will now begin the hearing with order number 202418.
Good morning. My name is Susan Nobbery. I'm an urban forestry inspector with the Bureau of Urban Forestry. And we just want to start with a little preamble to explain the bases for these fines. So Public Works Code Article 16 is the Urban Forestry Ordinance. Section 808 is the protection of trees and landscape material. So it covers injury to or destruction of trees, and that's prohibited. And it shall be unlawful for any person to intentionally, maliciously, and through gross negligence. So that means if you didn't understand or didn't know and didn't bother to do the research to see if there's a better way to possibly prune the tree or see if permits are required, that's gross negligence. So through gross negligence, injure or destroy a street tree, any tree on city property, a significant tree, or a landmark tree. Removal of a tree under city order or removal in accordance with a permit issued pursuant to Section 806, 810, or 810A are exempt. So if you have a permit to remove, you're exempt. So Section 806, planting and removal of street trees. This covers a removal permit. And if the department grants a tree removal permit, it shall require that a street tree or trees of equivalent replacement value to the one removed be planted in place of the removed tree or impose an lieu fee unless it makes written findings detailing the basis for waiving or modifying this requirement. I believe most of these cases are illegal pruning. So this just covers protection of trees during construction. Article 16 requires that trees have protection during all construction. This can be something as small as updating windows, any sort of construction, because what happens is people say they're not doing any work around the tree. but we see scaffolding put up, which is in one of these cases. And we don't see tree protection, and we see the contractors drive in and around near the basins and lay their equipment on it, causing scars and damage to the trunk. In this case, that did not happen, but that's just an example that usually construction triggers some sort of tree protection. And that also includes like not pruning the tree legally for your construction. So injury shall mean any act which harms or damages a tree, and that's including and not limited to impact, cutting, carving, painting, transplanting without a permit, or knocking over. It includes injures attachment of any rope, wire, nail, advertising poster, or contrivance to any tree subject to the provisions of this article. Intentionally and negligently, again, so some people say they don't mean to do things, so we're saying negligently allowing any liquid, material, solid substance that is harmful to the tree. That is not the case here, but the main thing here is that includes pruning, which in and of itself will kill or cause a tree to decline, or severing all or part of the tree. So the best management practices: do not remove more than 25% of the canopy of the tree. So in all these cases, we have more than 25% of the canopy removed. Do not remove more than 25% each year. This will stress the tree and may produce weakly attached branches the following year. The tree only has so many resources to grow wood and leaves and store sugars in those leaves and branches for use in times of stress, such as drought. When you remove more than 25%, you tap into those reserves. So do not cut back to a branch that is less than 1/3 or 1/2 the size of a main branch. This causes like adventitious roots, shoots to grow and branches that then compete with one another. It also creates large wounds that allow decay pathogens to enter the canopy. It is important to selectively remove the branches throughout the tree, not just the lowest branches you can reach. That's limbing up. That causes structural issues. It causes more limb failures. This can cause a tall, spindly tree. It reduces the trunk flare and girth, which is what's needed to put stability on the tree. The other thing is obviously topping. So don't top trees. Here's a picture of some top trees. You can see that there's just some stubs left, and these wounds are very large at the top of a tree. There's no real mechanism for trees to heal those wounds, so that allows decay pathogens to enter. So these are often what we see people say the trees are covering. Those are the sprouts that grow when the tree is stressed. It's tapping into those sugars and reserves to put on canopy, because essentially what you've done when you remove all the canopy is you remove all the photosynthetic material, which is like taking out somebody's ability to eat, essentially. Trees, they photosynthesize. They use carbon dioxide from the air to produce sugars to live, and if you remove all the leaves, it cannot do that. So you're essentially starving the tree. So this is a tree that tapped into its reserve. You see the sprouts, and then it died. So this happens when you tap into those reserves repeatedly. Another thing that happens is we get a lot of complaints that limbs fail. When you top a tree, and we're talking about those sprouts that grow from those topping cuts, they all grow at the same rate, the same time. They're competing with one another, and they put on bark in between those unions. This causes failure, this causes weakly attached limbs. So a topped, poorly maintained, illegally pruned tree is more maintenance than one that hasn't been pruned illegally at all. And so, as we discussed, those decay pathogens that enter those big cuts, sometimes you see decay like that on a tree, and those are those bacteria and fungi that enter those big cuts and wounds. And they enter the main stem, and they eventually cause decay, which can cause a limb to fail or the whole tree to fail. So here on the left, you see Pollarda tree. So outside City Hall, these platanus, they're pollarded. These are done at the nursery. And also platanus, or the London plane tree / sycamore, they're able to compartmentalize and put on knuckles. They're very special species. Very few other species can do this. And it's done at the nursery when the tree is very young. And we're even trying to get away from this practice because even though they seem to be able to handle it, their lives are a lot shorter than most of the street trees in the city of San Francisco. And so you see the tree on the right doesn't have those developed knuckles because it was topped very late in its life, and it's just not the right species to do that to. So we get a lot of complaints about line clearance. So on the left there, it's kind of small, so I apologize for that. But there are some cross arms, and there's a yellow sign that says high voltage. So high voltage lines, only PG&E can prune for those. Those are the dangerous lines. Those are what can electrocute you. PG&E is required by the state and by the National Energy Regulatory Commission to prune for those power lines. They inspect your trees annually. So the city is responsible for pruning everything below that. So we get a lot of complaints that the tree is touching communication lines or low voltage power lines. But as you can see from the tree on the right, that is actually very common. Those lines are insulated. And as long as there's no strain or abrasion or tangling of the tree to the point where the line has excess stress on it, it's pretty much fine. Like, these lines are designed for trees to be in conflict. And they're not even in conflict. These lines are essentially designed for trees to grow near and around them. So we also have Street Tree SF. The voters passed Proposition E in 2017, and after that, we took on the responsibility of every single street tree, which includes the liability. We have a pruning grid, and everything's based on the highest priority. Based on a census that we had done, it documented the size of the tree, the pruning needs, and everything was basically plugged in. And you can see kind of the center of the city does tend to have the largest trees, and that's our highest priority pruning areas. And one thing I want to point out is Prop E was covered by a lot of the local media outlets. It was covered in the SF Chronicle, and it was in Headline. And pretty much, if you do a quick Google search of San Francisco Street Tree SF or Prop E, you'll find that. So pretty much, it has been covered. If you ever have any questions, you can call. But a lot of times, like, rules and regulations change, and it's covered by the media outlets, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the DMV is going to send everyone an individual mailer, say, for example, if a regulation changes for your driver's license. So it's important to stay informed, read the newspaper, call the city if you have any questions. It's on our website as well. So since the start of Street Tree SF, we have pruned, actually it's more than 24% of the trees. Now it's probably more like 35% of the trees have been pruned since 2017. That's actually extremely productive. We've removed more than 3,000 at-risk trees as well. So we have 125,000 street trees in the city of San Francisco, where we basically did not have the resources to maintain or touch any of these trees for the last 20 years. And essentially in the last 2 to 3 years, we've pruned about 35% of them. So we do put out these door hangers when we are coming to your neighborhood to prune a tree. And it also has a little information about pruning, not pruning your tree, if it's a street tree, and reaching out to us. So one other thing is we have the street tree care class. So when you attend, we have a reduction in the fine. After this hearing, after all the results and decisions are made, you can go to the tree care class, and it teaches you about the benefits of the trees and the benefits of proper tree pruning. It reviews Street Tree SF. The class fee is $197. But it comes with a reduction in the fine if it's found that you're eligible. And I'm pretty sure everyone in this class is eligible to take, everyone in this hearing is eligible to take this class. With that, I would like to start with the first case. So order number 202418 to consider the appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for the illegal pruning of one street tree adjacent to 318 Lakeview, and the fine is $2,122. So it's a Tristania laurina. They're slow growing, and its actual max height is generally no higher than those lowest lines there. Its max height's like 30 feet tall. So here it kind of looks like the tree's stunted. It may have been topped before, but it has a decently large diameter. It's 10 inches, and that takes generally years for a tree to get to that size. And so when we see a tree topped, the majority of the canopy removed, that large limb there that was removed, essentially that took years for that tree to get to that size. So you're losing years of benefits there. And this is in a neighborhood that has some of the highest pollution in the city of San Francisco. It's District 11. And so we don't really like to see this because it really just reduces the benefits for everybody. And it also costs a lot of time and resources to replace and maintain the replacement tree. So there's another view. Essentially, like all the structural branches were removed. It does have sidewalk damage. I understand that. I understand some people think that topping the tree will fix that. That is not the case. I just want to reiterate that with Street Tree SF, we are responsible for the sidewalk, and we're doing the best we can to actually repair a lot of damaged sidewalk. But we have about 50,000 sites that we need to get to. So in order to be consistent, we issued the fine for $2,122 for illegal pruning. I just want to say that I believe most of these cases were reported to us from the public through 311.
Is the property owner present today? Sir, would you like to come up and speak?
Yeah.
Can you state your name, please?
And then you can put
Read my name?
here.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Austin Leung.
I'm sorry?
Austin Leung.
Austin?
Yeah.
Okay.
They spell my name is wrong. Liang.
Liang?
Yeah, they missed the G in
Okay.
the letter.
And it's Austin, Austen?
Austin.
D.
Austin, Texas.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you want to talk about what happened here?
Yeah, I can't chop the tree. The reason is because I don't want the people who's walking on the sidewalk, they got hurt. Especially my kid and my oldest parents, they complain all the time. Mm-hmm. That's why I try to fix it. I know that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because like the other side, they blocking who's parking the car over there. I don't cut the other side. I also like the street cleaning. They never clean the street. Mm-hmm. I don't cut the side because I don't care the car and street cleaning. But I just don't want the people who's walking on the street, they got hurt. Look at the sidewalk. Maybe I misunderstand. I think the tree I cut the park, they damaged the sidewalk.
Okay, what made you think people walking by would get hurt?
Because too low. Sorry. The people who's walking on the sidewalk, they need to do like this.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So you thought they would bump their heads on the tree? Okay.
Especially up on the upper side, they need to doing like this, and then the sidewalk. I think they want them to fall down. That's why I do that thing.
Did you contact Public Works and ask them about the tree before you cut the tree?
Oh, I don't know that.
Okay. Did you hire a arborist or a gardener to cut the tree, or did you
I cut
do
it by myself.
You did it yourself.
Honestly.
Okay. Okay. So you understand that that the city of San Francisco is responsible.
Right now, I'm sorry. Yeah, right now I understand.
Okay. Would you be willing to take the tree care class
Oh, when? Oh,
I believe it's, I always forget, when is it? It's on Fridays? The fourth Friday of every month, there is a class that you can take. It's $197.
$197?
Yes, and if you take the class, I believe we can reduce your fine. Would you,
How many hours? About?
3 hours?
Yeah, because I'm the single parents. I take it.
You'd be interested in that?
Yeah,
Okay.
because $2,000 for me is too
Yeah.
expensive for me.
Yeah,
I'm
I
single
understand.
parents.
Okay. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to say about this?
Oh, yeah, I come over here just to can waive the penalty or deduct the penalty.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming today, and we will let you know after the decision is made about this class, if you're
Yeah.
interested in the class, to reduce
Okay.
your fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is any member of the public present who would wish to speak about this case? Okay. Can I have the department return to?
Okay, is the appellant for 216 Dublin here?
For which one?
216 Dublin?
Okay. 202419.
I don't think they're here. We postponed this case back in 2018, and we're rehearing it.
So this is the second attempt?
Second time. That's why the fee is a little lower, because it increases every year for CPI.
Okay.
But basically, I mean, they have a ficus microcarpa in front of their property. It's not its max maturity height. It's actually much shorter than a typical ficus. There's no high voltage lines here in this case. The cross brace up there on the right shows that it's a low voltage line. They removed 90% of the canopy. They left large wound stub cuts. That's another view of that. That's a close-up of the stub cuts. There's pretty much no way for a tree like a ficus to close those wounds and compartmentalize that and fight the decay. So to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, we issued the fine of $1,973.
1,973?
Yeah, so that was from a few years ago, or a year ago, actually.
Okay.
1 year ago. But we postponed and let them rehear this case,
Okay.
but they didn't come.
Got it.
So we'll check to see if they sent anything, a written testimony.
Okay. Does anybody wish to speak on that case? All right.
Okay. So order 202-420, 71 Clarendon Avenue. This is kind of paired up a little bit. It's two different property owners, but they're side by side, 71 and 75. So I'll let the appellant explain that, the timing of the topping. But so we'll go deal with them individually, and it's to consider an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for the illegal pruning of one street tree adjacent to the property at 71 Clarendon. The fine levied for illegal pruning is $2,122. That is the current fee. These were reported to us through 311. So it's two sweet bays. They're of small stature trees. They look pretty healthy in this before picture. They are spaced fairly close together, but they look pretty good. They probably could use some clearance pruning for the road, so they need to be elevated a little bit. And I believe this pruning QMAP is coming up this month, believe it or not. So about 100% of the canopy was removed. Luckily, the majority of the structural branches remained, but essentially, like I said earlier, each time you remove 100% of the canopy, you're really tapping into those reserves, and it shortens the lifespan of the tree, and it really stresses the trees. So it looks like this was in July, and we had some pretty hot days too, like in the fall. So hopefully we can see some of the canopy come back and recover. I look forward to seeing those pictures. But essentially, that can really stress this tree, especially now while we have a very hot climate, unusually hot days. And again, we have 125,000 trees in the city. A lot of them are not large stature. We have a deficit of trees, and we need to increase our canopy by 50%, so we're not really keen to see maintenance like this. We don't really want to see situations where the trees' lifespans are shortened, because we don't want the maintenance issues further down the road where eventually when the trees decline, that's one more tree we have to remove, maintain, plant. It looks like some scaffolding is being put in place, so I suspect the canopy was removed for the scaffolding. We'll let the property owner speak on that, but there's also a few heading cuts, but it's not too big because the cuts are less than 1 inch, but it doesn't look like it was structurally pruned. It looks like it was just headed back, and that can create competing leaders. And again, I think the main issue here is that 100% of the canopy was removed. So that's 71 Clarendon. So to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, we issued the fine for $2,122. Should I go into 75, or do you guys want to appeal individually? You'll do both. Okay. So we'll go into 2000 case 202-421, 75 Clarendon. This is a tree right next to it. And to consider an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for illegal pruning of one street tree adjacent to the property at 75 Clarendon Avenue. And the fine levied for illegal pruning is $2,122. So there are the trees again. And here, so the tree a little farther away from Twin Peaks is the tree at 75 Clarendon. And this photo, you can get a little better view of the stub cuts made and the heading cuts. And again, it's a small stature tree that already lacked like lower sidewalk clearance, so we already don't want to see them topped and headed back because that kind of limits our ability to elevate the canopy when we're trying to prune for 14 feet over the road and 8 feet over the sidewalk, which is required by our code and it's ISA standard. And again, our pruning key map is in this area this month. And 100% of the canopy was removed, which is very stressful for the tree. There's a closer view of the stub cuts. And you even see there, kind of in the center of the picture, whatever was removed there is at least one half of the main branch that it was pruned from, and that, unless that's a competing limb, which it doesn't look like it is, that is essentially not a best management practice. So it's just a little photo of the heading cuts. So we would like an explanation of the heading cuts too, and just the total removal of the canopy. And so to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, the fact that this was reported to us by a member of the public, we issued the fine for $2,122 for 75 Clarendon.
Did you, so you mentioned ISA, what is that exactly? International?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, International Society of Arboriculture. City pruning standards is aligned with International Society of Arboriculture, best management practices, and ANSI Standards 300, American National Standards Institute, which dictates that 14 feet over the road should be pruned and 8 feet over the sidewalk for clearance. So when you get trees that are headed back, it kind of limits our ability to remove the canopy on the lower side.
And the 25%?
That is also an ISA standard, and it's also an ANSI 300 standard and a best management practice.
And do licensed arborists, are they required to commit to these standards? Are they aware of these standards, and are they, as part of their professional licensure, are they? Correct.
You can't pass the ISA exam without understanding these fundamentals about tree pruning.
Okay. So is there ever any case where 100% of a canopy should be removed under ISA standards?
No. There should never be a case where 100% is removed. If we need to do some structural pruning and the arborist says that they can't meet the best objectives for the tree by eliminating competing branches and setting up the tree for good growth, they may go a little beyond 25%, but that would require a discussion with us and looking at the tree with a licensed ISA certified arborist that's
Okay.
experienced in the field.
Great, thank you. Is the property owner for 71 Clarendon present? Yes. Good morning.
My name is Franklin Jackson. I live at 71 Clarendon. And I'll attempt to address, given that I was responsible for pruning both these trees at 71 and 75, I'll attempt to address both issues at the same time. First of all, I want to thank Susan for explaining all this in detail. Some of those photos I hadn't seen yet, so they were interesting to see. We only received before and an after picture for each house in our letter citing the fine. I have a quick question, though. Have you?
I read your,
Okay.
your,
All right,
your
good.
submission, yes,
Then
thank
I'll
you.
try not to belabor that. I'll
Okay.
just hit some high points here. First of all, we completely agree that the trees in front of our houses should be tended to carefully. And it's something we've endeavored to do for, since 1999, at least in my case. Mr. Park just moved in a couple years ago, so he hasn't been here that long. But my neighbors and I have sort of taken turns pruning or trimming the trees roughly every year. Our view was they needed to be pruned both at the same time, otherwise they would look odd, and because they're intertwined, as you could see. Anyway, we've been doing that for 2 decades. We thought it was our responsibility, in fact, to do that. And I can assure you that nobody has a greater concern for their health or as much of a financial stake in their health than us. And I want to, before I go on, just point out that in this particular pruning that's being objected to here, I'm solely responsible for that. It was my turn to do it, so I hired the people to do it. I oversaw them. I gave them the instructions. So if there's any fines or financial impact or whatever for this, that should be completely directed to me. My neighbor was on vacation at the time, which I thought was a great opportunity to do it without inconveniencing everyone. So anyway, I should be held responsible completely for both 71 and 70, the trees in front of 71 and 75. And I would like to also note that despite the after photographs that you're seeing here, our recent pruning intentions are basically in alignment with the Bureau of Forestry's goals, even if our actions appear to be at odds with them. I'll go into that later. But it's clearly at odds with the newly passed 2017 Proposition E, which I think took effect in mid-2017. Yeah, we were completely oblivious to that. Perhaps I don't keep closely tracking enough on the paper of every proposition that passes, but we've been pruning these trees for 20 years, and we assumed it was our responsibility, and we've just kept doing it all along. We don't usually do it to this degree. Didn't really intend to do it quite to this degree, but anyway, that's a habitual sort of response on our part. And although I'll admit that ignorance of the law is no excuse, I would submit that maybe it's a mitigating factor, especially since our actions were habitual and we felt it was our responsibility to continue maintaining the trees. Had we known that it was now the city's responsibility, we would have been glad to do it, because this basically costs $1,000 every year to prune these 2 trees together. I would have gladly have surrendered that responsibility and handed it over to the city. Having said that, we are not convinced, we do not believe that we actually violated Section 808. In particular, the part that says, and I quote, "It shall be unlawful for any person to intentionally, maliciously, or through gross negligence, injure or destroy a street tree. And we're talking about a street tree here, not, I don't believe these qualify as historical or significant trees under the city's criteria. First of all, we argue that the trees are not destroyed, and we've submitted various photographs, including ones that correspond to the ones that they submitted to us. And I believe you have those, but for example, this is from several months ago.
You can lay that under
Down
the
on there, and I will.
projector.
What does that do?
She's going to switch
Oh,
over.
okay.
It's toggled to show what was
Yeah,
on the
okay, great.
laptop, but she can switch it over to that projector in a second.
So this is what the tree looked like, I believe, early November. A little bit better now. Now, so I would assert that establishes that it's not destroyed. We can argue about how much it's diminished and whether we've reduced the lifespan of the tree. That's the tree at 75. This is the tree at That's at 71 in front of my house, 71 Clarendon.
Okay.
All right. Now, so that's the destruction part. There's the malicious part. I don't think our actions were malicious. We didn't take a chainsaw or an axe and go down and actually destroy or cut the trees down or just grossly rip off things. So I don't think malicious is in question.
I think it's mainly about the gross negligence,
Yeah,
the removal of 100% of the canopy, taking away the leaves that the trees require to process sunlight and
Yes,
provide.
and I'd like to respond to that.
Okay.
In terms of, I don't think, the fact that the argument that we removed a large percentage of the canopy, I'm not denying that, but I'm not sure I'd call that gross negligence. You might say that it's ignorance, but it's not gross negligence. In fact, I think it's more of the opposite, where you may consider us overzealous in maintaining the tree and uninformed as to arborist standards. But I'm not sure that's gross negligence, that action. Now you can say, well, you should have kept informed that the city's responsible. You should have known that the city had pruning standards. You should have studied those. You should hire a certified arborist, all of that stuff. That's an interesting argument for why it falls into the gross negligence category. I'm not so sure that, though, one could fairly characterize under normal terms gross negligence 20 years worth of maintaining trees that appear to be quite healthy, and we're following basically the same regimen. I don't know if that qualifies as gross negligence, maybe gross ignorance with respect to the law, but not gross negligence. And intentionally, I would argue that our intentions were anything but to harm the trees. Our intentions were the opposite. Our intentions were to improve the trees aesthetically, remove them so that they don't damage the house, et cetera.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because we need to kind of proceed. You've gone past the 3 minutes. Was the pruning in some way, was it done because of the location of the scaffolding that was erected around those trees? Was there interference by the trees and the scaffolding when the work was done on the face
No,
of the apartment?
the pruning was done, and I believe this is consistent, not for the scaffolding. I believe this is consistent with the city's pruning standards, which we weren't aware of at the time. But I quote, you can improve, the standards say, include the bullet items, improving aesthetic characteristics. That was why we generally did it each year. To provide clearance for structures. Now, in this case, the clearance for the structure was not the scaffolding to repaint the house.
What about was there an obstruction of the view of the balconies? It looked
No,
like there was
there's
a huge canopy.
We
that
don't
was
really
kind
have a view except for the next door neighbor. The houses in the next door block the view of the Golden Gate Bridge and all the cool views. No, it was done, it was the structure we were trying to keep it off of is the house. It basically hammers the house when it's windy, which it almost always is, which can make it hard to sleep. And I want to point out another thing. It creates also a really damp environment that promotes mold. If you look there, this is the 75 Clarendon, which was just repainted before my neighbor moved in 2+ years ago. And already you can see it's, brand new paint, and it's already got, green mold and everything all around it. I just repainted my house, which admittedly had been painted in 20 years, but I had to spend over $1,000 just to scrape the mold off before the painting could even start. And so having the trees basically brush up right against the house and create, block out the sun entirely, creates a really moldy environment. And so we were hoping to relieve that, but it didn't have anything to do with the scaffolding that was put up.
And you said you hired an arborist to...
No, I hired a crew to do a whole bunch of work, and it included those two trees. I have no idea if they're certified arborists or not. He told me, now I take full responsibility for what they did. I gave them specific instructions. But I will have to admit that I've watched them do all but the last 15 minutes, but when I came out, I was pretty shocked that the majority of the leaves were removed. That isn't what I intended, although my instructions were probably not clear enough, and I don't know, arborists speak. So yeah, I was not too pleased that the extent to which the leaves were removed.
Okay.
But but he assured me that he followed the previous people, which is another crew, that he followed their cut lines and everything, and his goals. What you notice, he didn't just like lop things off. Even the after pictures showed that it's basically following along. He trimmed what he thought was excess stuff that wasn't, if anything, was weakening the tree. But I'll admit, something in my instructions caused him to follow them to their logical conclusion. It ended up with the majority of the leaves being removed.
Okay.
However, those have largely come back. So anyway, just to wrap up, I'd like to point out that what we view as the primary facts. One, we didn't realize the
Sir,
change.
yeah, I'm sorry, you don't need to re-summarize. I totally get it. We've gone past the 3 minutes. We're trying to keep to a consistency
Although,
on that.
They got
And
well
we've-
more than 3 minutes at the beginning.
Well-
Okay, just one last thing.
Sure.
Here's presumably trees maintained by the city right off of 101, just south of Cesar Chavez Boulevard. And I don't know who did those, but those make the trees after pictures they've been showing today look silly.
I don't know who did those either.
It'd be interesting to know who did them and if the city did them, because that certainly doesn't set a good example. Anyway, we would respectfully ask, based on the fact that all the things I've mentioned, that you consider eliminating the fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a member of the public wish to speak on this case? And are we going to proceed with the 75 Clarendon, or was that wrapped into the last one? It was? Okay. Was this a situation where tree care class might be in order?
Yes.
Okay. Sir, Mr. Jackson, would you be interested in attending a tree care class for a fine reduction? Yes, sir. Okay. All right. Is there anything further anyone wishes to present? Okay. In that case, we will close the hearing. Thank you for participating today.